Okay, back to the tobacco policy focus and emphasis. We looked at how utterly assailed this particular drug is by the current culture, particularly in Australia. But you will notice when it comes to the education against tobacco, particularly stigma is permitted. I mean, the stigmatising the smoker is almost standard fare in the anti-tobacco campaign mechanism. There seems to be absolutely no holds barred when it comes to assailing this particular product, this evil drug of tobacco. The very latest commercial of June 2018 has a smoker stroke victim in bed, and the person's lying there looking emaciated, like a person almost dying of cancer, being turned over by obviously a family member and finding it hard to breathe, in fact almost on death's door. Well, that's what it appears. If this kind of imagery was done when it came to illicit drugs, there'd be an absolute outcry. You can't stigmatise a drug user. Yet this kind of outcome, stroke, debilitating illness, worse, even worse, is quite common with illicit drug use. As you'll see with some of these images of some of the campaigns that are out there, it's relentless how they portray cigarettes and their impact, and particularly using the smoker as the target, as these images show you, of their attack. Any tactic is employed to stop smoking. Even this particular video clip of an ex-smoker talking about how she prepares her day.
I'm married, and I used to be a smoker. I want to give you some tips about getting ready in the morning. First, you need then your hands read the Bible, and now you're ready for the day.
Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
Now, there seems to be no protest over this from anybody in the marketplace. Tobacco is universally and utterly assailed by the culture. It's a bad product, we want to get rid of it from the culture. Quit is the mantra. But we cannot challenge illicit drug use in the same way. So who's actually driving this narrative? Who's driving this interpretation? And why do we have such cognitive dissonance in this space? When it comes to tobacco, denormalisation is the strategy. And to quote Pam McColl from SAM Canada, the gold standard in tobacco prevention is denormalisation strategy. Denormalisation aims to tackle the predatory behaviours of addiction for profit industries. Legalisation discussions in the House of Commons and the Senate ignored denormalisation strategy and the lessons learned from decades of tobacco control when it come to reviewing cannabis as a drug legalisation proposal. That observation was made by Pamela McColl, the Director of Smart Approaches to Marijuana in Canada, when she was reviewing the Senate debate around the legalising of cannabis that's currently in play in Canada. And she was absolutely floored by the cognitive dissonance and the absolute hypocrisy that was in play. This denormalisation strategy that was applied as a gold standard against tobacco was completely ignored when it comes to cannabis, which is by far a worse drug for a number of reasons, which we'll go into later on. So again, when it comes to cannabis, the strategy that is in play is normalisation. As we saw with alcohol, cocaine, and opium and marijuana in previous centuries, the normalisation message was strong and particular. And we're seeing it here again now in the 21st century with the normalisation messages carried over from some of the 1990s when it comes to cannabis, using medical cannabis as a key driver for that normalisation message. Even in Netherlands recently, there was a call to sue the tobacco industry for harms, yet these same people in the Netherlands want to unleash, or have unleashed, cannabis. I want you to listen to this. In Holland, an umbrella organisation of various entities dealing with addiction is joined in a major lawsuit against the tobacco industry in Holland. And I'm quoting here, "The cigarette is a criminal product and all dealers must be dealt with accordingly. This product is so harmful, it's unbelievable it is just in the supermarket." That was the spokesman of the Dutch Network for Addiction Care. Now, it's interesting, again, we've got this war against tobacco, and it's working, certainly in Australia. It's had incredible impact, reducing daily smoking rates World War II, of an aggregate number of about 56% of the population smoking daily in 1945, down to an aggregate of about 13.5% to 14% of the population now smoking. And that's again with a socially acceptable and legal drug. But we can't possibly move illicit drug use from 10%, if you put cannabis in now, or take cannabis out, about 4% of the population using illegal drugs. We can't move that number down at all. It's impossible. We have to legalise it. So here we have two different messages completely at play under the same national drug strategy. We hate cigarettes. We've seen what cigarettes have done, the cost to our healthcare system, to the population, the ongoing illnesses that they create. So we have no qualms at railing against this product. But I've got to ask, and it's really important for us to look at this, when was the last time a cigarette saw a parent cut off their toddler's head with a butcher's knife? That's on record in New Zealand. Meth lab. 2 parents cut off the heads off their children, and they didn't even realise they did it. When was the last time a cigarette caused a man to beat his wife to death with his fists? This happens all too often with other drugs such as hallucinogens or amphetamine-type stimulants. When was the last time a cigarette was involved in a terrorist episode? Illicit drugs are consistently part of the harms done in this arena, with suicide bombers constantly being tox screened, having cannabis in their system and or other drugs. But we don't see an assault of the ferocity against these drugs as we do against tobacco. Who's driving this narrative? Who's managing this policy framework? As you can see here through these various news reports on, particularly on crystal meth, methamphetamine, and what it's doing to our welfare system, what it's doing to kids and families. You can see through these various images. And this particular one was a gentleman in Sydney that associates of ours are aware of what he did. This man was arrested for killing his mother and his nephew whilst on a crystal meth-induced rage. Now, when the police came, they arrested him, took him away, put him in jail, but they had to pick up the bird bath, or the garden ornament that was used to kill his mother. It took 4 policemen to put it in the van. That wasn't in the report. That was from people that knew the gentleman and knew the situation, because they also were drug using at the time. He came to about 24 to 48 hours out. It came to his senses after being on this meth rage. He said to the police officers in the lockup, "Oh, look, I need to call my mum and let her know where I'm at." Of course, they then had to inform him of why he was in the lockup and that he in fact murdered his mother and his nephew. He had no clue what was going on. Again, this is all too common with crystal meth, all too common with other drug use scenarios, but we do not rail against these drugs as we do against tobacco. Again, the question comes, why are we doing that? Why is there such a dissonance in this particular space? We've even got meth dealers targeting children now. Recent news coming out of Queensland, very recent, in June 2018. What these dealers are doing is they're lacing the marijuana with meth, which is now a common practice. And the kids, young as 10 years of age, are getting very quickly hooked on this stuff. In Victoria, ice crimes have surged 2,000% in a decade. Ice crimes. So it's not just the use of ice, but what's going on around them. What's happening? Meth arrests now exceed all other drug use. And according to the logic of the pro-drug lobby, we should be legalising it. After all, it's popular, and you can't stop people using it, as they continually tell us. So let's legalise and regulate this drug as well. We have this same narrative in play, these mantras that are logically inconsistent, and we've got to ask who is driving the policy interpretation in the National Drug Strategy. Even now, you'll see on this particular imagery here, there's a whole WorkSafe campaign now aimed at protecting our emergency service workers, our hospital staff, particularly in the emergency wards. Ambulance drivers for a long time now, in the last 2 or 3 years, will not show up at certain emergency call-outs unless the police are there simultaneously or before them, because there are drugs involved or alcohol involved. Now, what's interesting is alcohol has consistently been a problem. Harm's been done by alcohol, assaults, crimes, particularly domestic violence and family and domestic violence scenarios. Alcohol's always been a part of it. And certainly there's been assaults because of that, and it's horrific. And when they get into the hospital space and the emergency department, those assaults and those abuses continue. But it's only in the last 12 to 18 months that they've now ramped up this whole WorkSafe campaign, because crystal meth and other drug use have added to the level and ferocity of these assaults, and these verbal assaults and physical assaults. So now we've got an entire industry watchdog now involved in saying enough is enough. But at the same time, we've still got this narrative in the background saying, oh, we just need to liberalise our drug policy more. We need to go softer on illicit drugs. And the softer we've been, the more permission we've given, the permission paradigm that's been in play the last 10 years of our supposedly prohibition drug policy is only unleashing more and more harms on our community because we continue to give tacit permission to illicit drug use.